Welcome back to the Sandwich Generation Pod. I'm Robyn.
And I'm Eliesa.
And today we're talking about end-of-life choices and what it looks like to walk alongside someone you love through that process.
This conversation touches on death and dying, but it's also about love, intention, and honoring a life.
We're joined by these dynamic sisters, Sarah Longacre and Wendy Brown, who are here to share their story of their mom, Cheryl, and the powerful, thoughtful ways she approached the end of her life through VSED, which stands for Voluntarily Stopping Eating and Drinking.
Sarah has been a birth doula since 2001, and Wendy is a certified death doula.
These sisters are currently working on a documentary about their mom called the Cheryl Hauser Effect, which explores the process of VSED. We are so excited to have them here. Let's get into it. We all kind of are connected, which is really nice. We all live in the Twin Cities and we all know each other from business and, personal connections. So this feels just really nice to be having this conversation. You both are so dynamic. And I met Wendy years ago because Wendy had a greeting card company, right? And Wendy would open her gorgeous home that was like beautifully curated with Wendiness. I was like, what is this place? And then Wendy walked out of her room into the house effortlessly with just like a regular dress, but just looked like
$1 million
picturesque.
Yeah.
So Wendy would have these markets at her house. And, as the listeners know, me and Eliesa both have our own businesses. We don't talk about that very often, but we are business owners. And I ran into Wendy when I was starting out and she had these markets in her home. And that's where I actually was able to meet Cheryl, who we're going to talk about today. Another effervescent being that was in the house. I was like, who is this woman? And literally she struck me on my ass because she was maybe in her 60s, even 70s at the time, but she was full of life and energy. And she had lipstick on and bright eyes and an attitude. And I was like, this is everything I want to be. Like, who are you? And she's like, oh, I'm Wendy's mom, Cheryl. She was amazing. She was funny and she was present and she was, just
I also
somebody
had a chance to
forget.
meet your mom then. That's when because your mom came. I mean, I think I had at least 2 pop-ups when you were here. And one of them, I know your mom was helping you set up.
Oh, that's amazing.
You remember
Wow.
that?
That's amazing.
So I have a memory of your mom just being like your wingwoman.
Yes.
And she was so sweet. I mean, she was obviously very supportive, but wasn't trying to dominate your new line.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that was a gift to have her a part of that as well.
Yeah. So my mom, it's funny because Cheryl reminded me of my grandma, Jean. She would light up the room, in the most amazing way with glamour and humor and energy. And that was a lot like what it was like when I met Cheryl. I was like, wow. And my mom, my grandma Jean's daughter, and my mother, she's much more of I want to blend in. I'm not here to be known. She's the quiet strength. She's the one by your side. And over time, just creates a permanent place in your heart that you just don't even know where it came from because she did it so quietly. And so she's opposite, I would say, kind of your mom. So anyways, it's just really nice. And then Sarah, I saw in real life in public and I had never actually met her before. And I was creeping around her, being like, I want to talk to you. And now you're here
And that
today.
was at the premiere, right?
It was.
Yes.
It was.
Yeah.
Yes.
So talk to us about the premiere. What is the premiere for? Because this is big news and I think it's going to help so many people.
Yeah.
So Cheryl Hauser, our mother, Wendy and Sarah's mother, chose to make a courageous, beautiful decision to end her life using something called VSED, voluntarily stopping eating and drinking. She was diagnosed with Alzheimer's and knew she didn't want to have her life end with Alzheimer's. She knew that she wanted to be in charge. So we had a film crew and producers approach our family a few years before our mother's passing, and they documented our mother's last few years of her life and the journey of choosing VSED, the journey of planning her own death, everything down to what cocktail she was having at her celebration of life party that she was not at. And what ended up becoming of it is hundreds of hours of footage from my mom's, literally her childhood, the day she came home from the hospital, all the way to the day she took her last breath. And we are taking that footage and we are creating a story. And the story is our mother's journey with voluntarily stopping eating and drinking. It's a documentary. It'll be a short, probably around 20 to 40 minutes. And so right now, what we're doing is we are showing the 4-minute trailer to educate, to inspire, and to raise funds for the completion of the documentary.
Wow. That's
That was
incredible.
really long way to say that we are making a documentary about our mother and her choice to end her life with her own dignity of doing something called VSED.
Wow. That's awesome. And that's what you saw, Robyn.
Yes,
That's when
and
you met Sarah. Yeah.
right, and that night was really amazing because it was at a local theater in Minneapolis, and we were able to see the village that surrounds your family and probably a lot of what Cheryl helped build. And so there was a lot of energy and there was a lot of magic in the room, and you felt connected to everyone, even if you didn't know everyone. And I think that makes me want to sort of back up to talking about who was Cheryl. Like, why is she such a notable person? Obviously, she's your mother, but how do we begin to describe who she was? Tell us about her.
Well, she was a connector and a storyteller. I mean, I think, yes, she could come on strong to some people, but, the moment that they had a chance to really pause with her and for her to see that she had a intuitive sense, she could read people pretty well. She wanted to be a part of a conversation. She wanted to be involved in lots of different things in her life. I mean, she was an educator for many, many years. She very comfortable speaking in public, be it in front of, a kindergarten class, to large masses of people at a church, to her own journey with Alzheimer's and making this choice to VSED. She was always very strong about, I got to be true to these are my thoughts, and no one can change my mind about this, that, or the other. And I think because, she had a great loss with her parents dying in 1977 in the world's largest plane crash. She and her brother, Will, our uncle, who was our closest relative, they had a very small family. And so that was really it. When they lost their parents, they had distant relatives, but their world crumbled. And, to see how they both could be emotional human, very different, but emotional humans together, and work through grief through the next decades in their own way. Our uncle, who was diagnosed with Alzheimer's maybe about 8-9 years before my mom was, and died within 5 years of his diagnosis. He lived on an island as a 40, 50-year-old, built his own cabin, and he would be very open about the loss of his parents. And he would cry to us often, but in not a, I'm stuck in this grief necessarily. So I bring that up because they were both beautiful examples of how to continue bringing your loved ones that are no longer with us into our life, and not to ever hold back tears. I mean, as we both would say, like our mom, like it would be a bad day if there weren't tears shed for joy and for grief. It was always something that we were brought up, like, it's all right to cry. Like that was our motto, right? She wouldn't overthink things either. I think she would, and so thankfully, in terms of VSED, voluntarily stopping eating and drinking, even before she was diagnosed with this, the disease of Alzheimer's, she had learned about this option as around the time I was becoming a death doula. And after watching her brother, Will, die from this disease, she thought, what an incredible option for me to have the choice and make that decision now that if I do have this disease, I don't want to live my entire life with this. I don't want to die through the final stages of Alzheimer's. And so she made that decision, and it was kind of like, yeah, like not even a question. Let's put it to the side, and I'm going to just keep traveling and living my life and driving and doing all the things that I can. Sarah, what else do you want to say about Mom?
I just wanted to pause on that. I mean, we get asked quite often. I don't know if we've ever done an interview or a talk where someone hasn't said, well, she must have wavered, or you guys wavered, or there must have been wavering. There was never, ever a waiver. Not even during the process was there, but the years leading up to it, she wore this like a badge of pride. It was so beautiful to see. She's like, I saw my brother die of Alzheimer's. There has to be another way. I do not want my children to see me in those stages, not from an ego way, but just like, why we don't have to do it that way. She
Mhm.
didn't want to live in a home. She didn't want to spend the leftover money she had. She didn't want to spend it on that. And mostly, she wanted to know who we were when she was crossing over. She wanted to have her dignity of being able to be a part of this huge decision. And after seeing her brother, after learning more about it, she's like, oh, like, there's no choice. Like, this is what we're doing. And no one even tried to convince her any other way, because she was just like, what are you talking about? Like, this is what I'm doing.
It sounds like she was a woman of her own destiny always, right? Like that's what
Yes.
I hear when you're describing
Yeah.
her, is like she knew what she wanted from her style, the way she carried herself, who she was maybe from that tragedy even earlier on in her life. And in that decision, it was just another one of her decisions where she was very sure of herself and what she
And
wanted.
I would say, I mean, so there's the spontaneity that our mother was, that was just loved a good time. Let's go do that. Let's go do this. But she didn't wear her regrets. She's like, I have 3 regrets in life. Like, number one, a house that my parents bought. She was like, I wish we would have bought this other one. Okay, great. But she had no shame. She was married 4 times. She wore that like a badge. She was like, yeah, I'm great. People want me. I'm beautiful. I got married 4 times. She was so landed in her body as a human. Like, this was not her first time being here as a human. And that was a big piece too, is that she had no fear in dying. I mean, one of her biggest things she would say daily, she had a lot of quotes that she would say, but one of them was, I'm not scared of the dying. I just don't want to leave you.
Sure.
And let me tell you, and Wendy will tell you, she has not left us.
Well, and that's why I think, the story isn't just about VSED. It's about who your mother was as a human being and what she brought to this planet and what she brought to your lives. I mean, I met her twice and she made an impression on me. So I really love hearing about who she was before all of this happened, and give us a little bit more color about, like, what do you think people really loved about your mom?
I don't know why I think of the story, and it's silly. It's here. You might be like, huh? But she was at a gathering where she met this woman, and somehow it was before she was diagnosed, but not too much. Like, it was closer to her, definitely last 5, 6, 7 years of her life, where she found out that this woman didn't know this soundtrack, "Free to Be You and Me." It was a record we grew up with, right?
I grew up on
And
that record.
you did, yeah.
Yes.
Best
It's
ever,
all right to
right?
cry.
Oh my,
That's
yeah.
All right to
Well,
cry.
That's
yeah,
from Free to
yeah.
Be You and Me.
Right. I had a solo in that in 2nd grade. And so the next day she went out and purchased the DVD of Free to Be You and Me, because she knew this woman had to have this music, right? And so she loved it, and she wrote a note and blah, blah. And I think I bring it up because, one, who does that? No one decides to give a gift to a random stranger and spends the $20 and figures out where she lives. But she was a little annoyed that the woman never wrote a thank you note. Never really addressed it. There is an expectation that she had. I
Yeah.
mean, she had many different kinds of friends. That's one of the biggest parts that I look at her and I think, there wasn't one personality. There wasn't one way of life. She had very conservative to very open. And I don't know, Sarah, you probably could add a little funny story with that.
I want to tell you, I don't even know that story.
Yeah.
That is awesome. That is so awesome. I mean, the biggest thing about her, and I know I've said this before, but like, she was just such a yes person, that she was so playful. She's like, oh, let's do this. And da-da-da-da. And oops, this is like the other day I was in spring break. We were in Mexico, and I was swimming in the ocean with my best friend and our 2 kids. And there was this other cute 30-some-year-old 2 girls coming out, and they're coming swimming. And I turned to them. I'm like, come play with us. And my best friend and my daughter looked at each other. They're like, hi, Cheryl. I'm like, oh yeah, that's totally my mom. She's like, come on, we're just going to go do this. Like, this is just what we do. She worked at Dayton's for decades, and she was one of those people that, like, she loved it because all she did was just chat with people and talk and get their stories and tell her story. And like, this is just what we do. And
Sell a
we
bag
say
in the middle of it.
sell a bag. Oh, and she loved retail. She loved to shop. But I would say that. And she was so also deeply spiritual, and she wanted to solve problems. My mom could talk relationships. She could talk openly. She was the one in high school that, like, my girlfriend went to when she needed an abortion. Even though she made me crazy in high school, she was that person to so many of our friends. And
That's awesome.
she was just fun. She was fun.
How would you have described her as a mother to you? Like, what kind of mom was she?
Wendy and I have really different answers probably for this because I've done a lot of deep work where I found out what my mother and I were in this lifetime. And this particular lifetime, this is the first time that my mom's ever been my mother. We've always been sisters or cousins or best friends in our lifetime. So I always had a hard time, like out of the three of us, Wendy's the mom of the three of us. My mom and I are both Sagittariuses, and Wendy's the Virgo. She's the oldest child. Like she kept my mom and I together. And my mom and I'd be like, "Should we go get a drink? Should we sneak this?" And Wendy's like, "Come on, people," which is so great. We needed Wendy. Then they were really different years. I mean, there was the years that we were younger that she was unbelievable and played hard, and we danced all the time, and I loved her. Wednesday nights she had to go to bell choir. She was in bell choir, and I dreaded Wednesday nights as a little girl. Like I dreaded Wednesday nights because I knew my mom was going to be gone, and I loved having her around. And then we went through chapters where it was really ugly, probably more than a normal teenager, just because of some choices that she made and the way that I held on to my anger. And then my parents' divorce, I really manipulated the crap out of both parents to get what I wanted. So that was really changing. And then Wendy left for college, and my mom married a really, really awful man. And she thought that she deserved to be in a bad marriage. This is all getting way too deep, but all to say, then I was angry. Like we just had a lot of ups and downs. We forgave each other, and we became best friends the last 20 plus years. I mean, she's who I'd go to for everything, but I realized the reason I went to her for everything is that she always agreed with me. Like I could literally be like, "Mom, the sky is brown." And she'd be like, "Yes, it is. It is." We had a different relationship, I think, than Wendy and she did. Wendy and she were so much deeper on like other levels.
How would you describe her as a mom,
This is
Wendy?
a full-on therapy session.
Yeah, we haven't had this for 3 years, Sarah. My mom, as Sarah said, was just a very present, beautiful mom. Like she had her own things and lots of friends, and they'd entertain, and they had other their lives were not just their children. So I think they were beautiful examples of that. But they wanted us to have experiences, and they gave us exposure to things, and they were fairly well-rounded South Minneapolis parents. And then through affairs and divorces and things like that, it did get messy. There was definitely a time where mom was wanting to be much more of a friend than a mother. And that's what I struggled with the most. I've been putting up boundaries for quite a bit.
I didn't learn boundaries till I was 42, I realized. And like Wendy must have gotten in kindergarten. She's like, "Nope, we don't have to do that." I'm like, "Yeah, you do. That's what you do." And it was so good that Wendy knew that.
I don't know how it came to be. I don't know. I think I had like certain role models around me, but I do think that one of the hardest parts about mom's dementia taking over her life was that just to see that there were certain parts of the mothering that were just gone. But I would say there were still moments where I could come to her within like the last month of her life and just break down about personal things. And she did step into like the mother role. And it was so great that she still would be able to do that. She could be present, but there was usually something that she was looking forward to, be it like an event, a trip, something like an outfit for an occasion. And so that was a big part of starting to lose her understanding of time and just being able to keep anything in place in her brain. Because one, as I mentioned, she liked to be involved. She liked to be a part of the action. Two, like when you don't even know what to do with your brain. She's like, it was often like, I don't know what to do. That was the hardest part for her because there was always something that she was excited about. And so those had to be small. Like, she was still very much her, but she was really not being able to show up in the way that she wanted to, I think, as a mother, as a friend, as a wife, as a community member, as a musician. Through this film, she was really thrilled she had this opportunity. She wasn't necessarily looking for it, but when the opportunity arrived, she was 100% on board with this. And so this was this new outlet for her to still be able to do some of those things that she was good at, like explain her life story and talk about what mattered and have a reason to put on lipstick and come down looking elegant or eventually in front of the cameras, she did start being able to be super emotional and not as chic, and which is good.
So how old was your mom when she got diagnosed?
She was 73.
And then how old was she when she passed?
She was 77. She was 74 when she was diagnosed. Sorry.
Can you tell us, I don't know if you remember the day or if you can describe the time in which you guys started to notice things were changing. Did she notice? Did you notice?
It was so on our forefront because of my uncle and because we lost our grandparents when they were barely 60. We didn't have any history. Both my grandparents were from small families, so we didn't have a long history to know if it was in our gene. And we had been just kind of keeping an eye, on it. And between her husband, David McNally, between Wendy and I, there was just enough little things. And we were so open about it. I think that's one of the biggest things that I want to share in this film is just from day one. It was like, hey, are you guys noticing this? And mom's like, I'm noticing it. Like she owned it.
Okay. So you would have the
Oh, yeah,
conversation with her and
I mean,
she
she
would
would be
say,
the one who brings it up. She's like, I think something's going on. I would say, Wendy, we noticed this a year before she went to Mayo and got the diagnosis.
Yes, she noticed it a year before she had the official diagnosis. I mean, she had been voluntarily taking memory tests at Methodist. She had gone for, I'd say, like 5-6 years before she was diagnosed at the Mayo. And she knew the test so well, she had memorized it. It was kind of a joke, actually. But they did notice things that there was cognitive impairment that was happening slowly. And, it would be anything from, I'm not able to read these piano keys. I see them, but they're not computing in my brain and they're not coming out of my fingers. Or like, look at my calendar. It's kind of getting messy. I keep thinking this is there. And she was able to drive a couple of years before she was diagnosed. She was still traveling alone. But I think knowing that this was in her family, she assumed that, with her brother dying from it, and with these signs happening, she thought, I need to actually get like a full 2.5-day multiple tests, scans, etc., to see specifically what's going on inside my brain.
Say too, she used to take care of my daughter a lot. And I remember one time she climbed up on a stool to get popcorn for my daughter and she had a really bad fall. And as we know, Alzheimer's, it's so much more. It's spatial recognition. It's just how we do things. It's a lot. So it was this falling on the stool that she probably could have picked herself up, but something was different. Something was really off. When we found out the day she came back from Mayo, she came to Wendy and I separately with her husband. I remember the day so well. I remember it was a Saturday. It was beautiful, but it didn't feel like a surprise because it just was part of our story. And we talked so openly about it. And her whole thing was, great, I'm going to go kick ass. I'm going to go live life as best I can. Like, why can't we all do that without that
and
diagnosis?
I don't want to minimize this because we talk all the time about, it's about the hard conversations, right? And it's about all the conversations you have around somebody who's older about like, they shouldn't drive or like, have you noticed mom hid the wheat thins again? What are we going to do about it? And I just think, obviously, Cheryl lived her life with so much intentionality and so much conviction in everything she did. She just would commit, it sounds like, right? She committed 4 times. That's amazing. I'm thinking, wow, that's like Elizabeth Taylor. She kind of was.
No, she probably wanted to, she would probably have more if she could because she loved throwing parties too.
But she would double down. She would commit. She would really lean into something. That's how I felt about her when I met her. It was like, came down, I'm glamorous. This is my outfit. Of course I'm going to wear lipstick. Like, this is me. And it's the same with this. It's like, well, I'm an external processor and this is what's happening with my brain. And we're going to talk more about what happened next. But she wanted to live with intention and die with intention. And they say the way you
so much joy. Exactly.
And
This
so
is the way
much
you
joy.
live is the way you live is the way you die. And obviously Wendy and I knew from the moment that this happened. Let's just use an example. She doesn't remember where we bought something or the plant or a name of something. And she would just start laughing, most of the time. In the mornings were harder, but she would just start laughing. She's like, I don't know the name of that thing. What is that called? And she would just own it instead of fighting it.
Yeah.
And that to me was the beauty and the story and the grace. Yes, the frustrations were huge. Yes, the mornings were so painful and long. But in general, she took this with such stride. She did not fight this diagnosis.
It wasn't her idea to be the spokesperson for VSED, but I knew there was a buzz, but I don't think she really wouldn't have known that something this large was coming from it. And I think she would be thrilled. I mean, she is thrilled. She's started this, we got to talk about her now. We talk about her all the time. She's part of so many people's lives in ways that she really didn't know. And I think that was the other part too. I mean, I think it's kind of a beautiful part to bring into this discussion now. It was after she died, we found out that there were certain steps and protocol placed in Park Nicollet, which is who she used for hospice, that needed to be created after the story of Mom's choice to VSED was in the public. All of these people were coming to Park Nicollet and asking for this similar support. And because her story was out there, and they basically were like, what? Fine, but why is there this surge of interest? So basically they had to put these steps into place, which we ended up having to use after our initial ask for hospice. 4 years later, we arrived and said, okay, actually, this is the real deal. We need it now. And so I would have these people come out to us and just say, and people that I know are conservative and wouldn't necessarily consider this. And the power of choice and also just that opportunity that Mom and the two of us were giving people to understand what this process was like. I think that.
Well, I think it's the vulnerability too. The vulnerability that we let people see and our own pain
Right.
was very different than anything that's typically out there. Yeah.
I just think my day job is a photographer, and storytelling is a huge part of what my career is based off of. The impact that sharing stories have in our culture is enormous. It's enormous. And I love that your mom was up for this because the potential is huge, not only to help individual families, but to help give more choice and awareness in our healthcare system and in the dying process. And even just how you're talking about her approaching an Alzheimer's diagnosis and living with joy. That alone is such a gift for people to hear, because it is hard. We don't want to minimize that. It is tragically hard, but there are options on how to live in the dying. And that's what I love about your mom's choice. And then there's also this choice by you as her family to carry out these wishes of this documentary and to get this to the people. I'm going to get a little witchy here, but I think that we all have purpose, right? And there's so much more than sometimes we can understand about our purpose. But when you do say yes, just like your mom did, but also just like you are, you're realizing your purpose without limits and without boundary. You know what I mean? And that is pretty incredible.
I'd say some of this is, we are hopeful that with this story getting out in the public, that it's not at all saying yes to VSED, but saying yes to, I'm timid, but I'm okay having a conversation about what I want at the end of life, or be it with your partner, your parents, your children. And there has been a shift in the past 5-10 years of this kind of groundswell of people having more of an interest or understanding that, okay, yes, there's been medical magic happening for decades now, where people have been treated and people live longer. But because of that, people have been fighting, the doctors included, don't want to talk about what happens. Someone doesn't want that next treatment, or someone is wanting to talk about, I'd rather have, better day, fewer days, but better than longer days, or than more days and not being happy and not feeling joy. And I think it's the more that we can get people to talk about mortality, the more that hopefully they're living in the present day.
Last week, I was taking my mom to an appointment, and in the car ride home, we actually were sitting in my car eating Panera lunch as we were discussing healthcare directives. Very, very casual. But she was like, it used to be that people just let things happen. And she is a pretty spiritual person. And she was like, they would just let life take its course and let God do their thing. And what would happen would happen. And she was like, and now I feel like I have a whole file of paperwork basically on what my wishes are or aren't. And the doctors are so scared of, in her opinion, doing something that will get called a medical malpractice. And she's just like, it's just so different. Her perspective of aging was like, things happen, but you let the natural process happen. My parents live in assisted living. And so the conversation of death is their coffee talk. It's what they talk about at the pub on their Friday nights, you know?
Ah.
And my mom deals with chronic pain, and a lot of her friends in assisted living do as well. And so that's something that they talk about often. And this kind of ties in with VSED, obviously, but she kind of, she has asked me in the past, like hypothetically, like, well, what if? But I think it's also a real honest question
Mm-hmm.
that her and her friends talk about regularly as they're aging, as they're in chronic pain on the hard days. Like, is there another option? Could I do that? Could I make this decision?
I'm sure people that are listeners really want to understand what VSED is because we keep talking about it. I know I'm watching my mom slowly die from Alzheimer's, and it's awful. Just is. I always say to my husband, I'm like, just crush it up and put it in the peanut butter. I want Skippy. I think after you witness the process, I think you can't help but think about what your options are. And it was always so taboo and off the table, and everybody has different values and different feelings about it. But to feel in control of the way you can die is a very new idea, and to not be shamed for it. And I just want to mention that. And I'm so fascinated by that because I know it's still really controversial, but it's very freeing for me to think about. So that being said, can you guys back up a little bit and talk about what is VSED and how did it come into your orbit?
So medical aid in dying MAID is a legal option, and I think 14 states. It's not quite legalized in New York. Illinois just passed it. It will become actually legal, and you'll be able to use it mid-September. So in the last 5 years, more states have been pushing to have it legalized. We were close a couple years ago. We'll get it. I believe Minnesota will have options, hopefully sooner than later. Oregon was the first state to legalize it, I think like 25 years ago. Seattle was 5 after that. So in those states, if you have a diagnosis where you have 6 months or less to live, and you have the cognitive ability to understand why you're taking a medication, and you have the approval from 2 different doctors and are able to administer the medicine yourself, then you potentially have the legal option to use medical aid in dying, which will end your life with this medication. There are 2 states that allow you to use medical aid in dying if you're not a resident. You still have all those rules still apply. You just have to be in that state. So it's Oregon and Vermont. You are there for a couple weeks and you have 2 doctors that it's kind of the same steps. But either way, you need to be on hospice in order to have medical aid in dying as an option. So even in the states where MAID is legal, if you have any kind of a diagnosis with dementia or it's just a cognitive neurological disease, you will not be able to use MAID, because when you have 6 months or less to live with that kind of disease, you would not be able to understand why you want to be taking this medicine and what this is all
Sure.
about. So MAID will probably never be an option for anybody with dementia. So that's when this option of voluntarily stopping eating and drinking comes into play as an option, which is legal in every state. Again, it's important for this person that wants to be said to understand why they're doing this and that they're behind it and that there's a plan in place. There's a lot of planning around VSED because you want this to be supported with hospice to be able to access their medication, their comfort care, their team of doctors and nurses, and all the beauty that hospice brings in. It's really important. And there's steps that needs to be in place in order to make this a sacred, safe option. I'd say
And supported for not only, but for the person who's making this choice, but for the entire family and network and system and friends. Having these structure in place. I just want to be clear that several people have said to Wendy and I, oh, my grandma did VSED or my mom did VSED. They just stopped eating and drinking on their own. Like, that's a natural process that happens when you're sick, when you maybe have dementia. But this is very different. This was someone who knew what they were doing, had her whole family say, yes, we are supporting you, her community, went and took the legal steps, the medical steps to set up the plan, to say what date she wanted to start, to then start, and we'll get more into the process. But I think that's really important to understand, that this isn't just this one person being like, oh, I'm just going to stop eating and drinking. The amount of support that you need from hospice, a death doula, a nurse that's maybe coming in who you privately hire, but the whole family and the community, those steps need to be in place to make sure the person is comfortable, to make sure that the person's dignity and they're being respected. So I think it's just really important to realize that this is different than someone who's just like, oh, my grandma stopped eating and drinking, she did VSED.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So how long before you had to activate your plan did your mom start planning? Was it like 10 years before?
It
Was
was
it 5 years
Well,
before?
it was 5 years before she died from VSEDing. When she learned about the option to VSED, it was a year before she was diagnosed.
Okay.
She read a book that I had read when I was interested in death doula work. And I read this book that a woman named Phyllis Schachter wrote called Choosing to Die, that she wrote around her experience when she was supporting her husband, Alan, who had dementia. And it was the first book. She was the pioneer to share the story with world. So mom read this, and at the time she'd read things really fast, and she wasn't like, "Oh, I've been waiting for this book. Thank God there's she just was like, "Oh yeah, this is what I'll do. Awesome. All right, let's just keep it in mind. If this is what I have, which I probably do." She knew, and I was like, all right, well, we'll just put it to the side. And if this is what happens, Mom, we'll talk more about it. So within a week after the diagnosis, she approached me and said, I very much would still like to VSED. And I said, well, let's see how that can happen for you. And within a couple of months, I attended an appointment with my mom, David, her partner, and her internist, who my mom shared her desire to VSED and her desire to be supported through hospice. And her internist, who she liked very much, she was, a modern gal. She said, well, I hear you want to do this. It's very hard. People say they want to do this, and it doesn't happen very often. I'll give you the thumbs up to receive this hospice support. So we met with a hospice team a couple months later. And as a doula, on the side, I kept saying, so have you've done this before? Is this something you guys usually, I haven't heard about hospice supporting. And they said, well, people VSED, but they just don't call it that. And yeah, but we do it. And it was really kind of a big deal. They didn't raise big questions about it. They just said, well, when you're closer, give us a call. Okay. So we also around that time created a VSED statement, which was helpful for a couple of reasons. One, so hospice knew, okay, Cheryl's very intentional about this, right? This is the reason why, in kind of a short paragraph of why she's deciding to do this, what it will look like. And then it was also an opportunity for my mom, her family, and the hospice to see that mom was clear about what these markers would be of when she would be closer to wanting to VSED, when she was starting to lose certain capabilities and independence. And so that was really helpful, because then we could start thinking about, okay, so it's not when mom can't recognize her loved ones anymore, because we know if that's the case, then we've missed that window for her to understand what it means to VSED and why she'd want to do this.
Yeah.
We actually did 2 rounds of a VSED statement. The first included things like when I can't heat up my coffee in the microwave, when I am not driving anymore, when I have a hard time unloading the dishwasher. Well, those things happened. She wasn't able to do those things, but she was still able to find joy, and she still knew what was going on, and she still understood what it meant and why she'd want to VSED. So those markers shifted to more about when I am not comfortable leaving the house as much, and when I'm not able to track conversations, and when I'm getting scared in places that were always common to me, like a grocery store. And those things started showing up. And so it was every week or two within the 2-3 years in that time period of sharing between my sister, myself, and David, her husband, what we were noticing and what care she was needing, what care he was needing, and and all the things.
It also sounds like you were saying that it's okay if the plan changed, and it was okay to modify as her dementia started progressing and showing up. It wasn't these hard boundaries that was like, okay, you can't empty the dishwasher, time to die, right? She was still able to be present enough in these choices and that decision. And while you still knew that these were her wishes, it was okay to modify her statement and her plan along the way.
Was there a day that there was a conversation about I'm ready, or did you say, I think it's
I think that
time?
was Wendy's and my greatest fear was, what if we get to the point where we have to be the ones that bring it up? But she was so on top of it. I'll never forget. And it was November at my house, and she was at the counter just crying and wailing, just saying, I don't know how much longer I can do this. And I said, okay, so mom, it's November. And she's like, I want to do one more holiday. She wanted to have one more birthday. She wanted to have one more Christmas and New Year. She's like, I want to do one more. She had a really big trip in just January after that year. Her husband took her to go see Stephen Colbert, her best friend who lived in Boston. And so these things would happen, and we knew it was getting closer. Basically, two major things happened within 1 week where she didn't know which one of her grandsons, Wendy's two boys, were which. And then she was on speakerphone with her husband with a medical question, a medical provider on the other line. And the medical provider asked her two things that she knew all the time. The first one was, what's your birth date? Couldn't find it. Second was, what's your home address? And I can just see her face just looking at David and being like, I don't know.
Yep.
I don't know. Those were pretty big markers.
And just to step back for a moment, with those holidays that she thought, okay, let me just get through those. She was already in that state of mind, knowing that there's a good chance this might be some of these last seasons. So much so that she had been talking about for a while, and we helped her facilitate a party with all of her closest friends that October of 22, before the next year when she died that spring. So, and in that party, it was very much like, I want all the people in my world to meet each other and to share stories and the background. Someone might find it a little egotistical, but mom was like, hey, like, you gotta all meet, like, and know each other, because you might do it this once, but who knows if you're gonna even cross paths at the memorial. It was also her time to say, like, I love you and thank you for being there and showing up for me.
Every moment wasn't terrifying because she's so comfortable with death.
Thankfully, it was about a week into April, and I was driving mom up to Sarah's cabin, and I just said, how are you doing today? And she said, I need to be VSED next month. And I was relieved and shocked at the same time. I was like, oh my God, thank God she found it on her own. But like, wow, she's really calm about it. Okay. And I said, okay, mom, next month is in 3 weeks. And I know that's hard to even visualize, but a week is 7 days and a day goes by pretty fast. So it's not tomorrow, but it's fairly soon. And she said, yeah, I'm ready. It's the time. And then within a couple weeks, as Sarah mentioned, she was starting to forget some major pieces in her life. And so that time was beautiful and messy and difficult in all the ways. In those like 7 weeks of her world was getting smaller, yet she was able to still show up to a meeting with the funeral director and their group at the venue where we were hosting her party after her funeral, because she wanted to be there. She wanted to hear about the drink. She wanted to hear about the food. She wanted to know about all the specialties. She was like, this is going to be an awesome party. I can't wait. And we're like, yeah, mom, you're not
She's
going
like,
to be there. You're
I'm
going
not
to be.
going to be there, am I? And we're like, no. She's like, oh, okay, well, have fun. I mean, I'll be there, but yeah.
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 So, and the beauty was that, our camera crew was there for that meeting and got to tape her dancing in the location where we all were going to be celebrating. So,
Wow.
and she just would find joy in it. It was these experiences that she still got to be a part of. And I would say too, like in her last 2-3 weeks, she was also often in her robe at home. And we would just manage the visitors, and we started kind of thinning them out of who mom would want to see, who would want to see her. There were many people that unfortunately didn't get a chance to see her because she just didn't have the bandwidth, and that's okay.
Yep, totally.
I had no idea that VSED was an option when my mom was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and I am so grateful that these sisters are out in the world talking about this. If you know someone who could benefit from this information, please just take the time right now and just share this episode. I think it could really help another family.
You mentioned the legal planning for VSED. What goes into the legal side?
I would say it's kind of simple. There's a dementia healthcare directive, and it doesn't need to be signed by a lawyer. It needs to be signed by two witnesses, not family related. And it is a legal binding document, but lawyers don't have to be involved. I'd say there are other things that you need to do to make sure, there's your own will, there's making sure everything
Your
else
estate
is
planning.
lined up. Yeah. I mean, all those things are very, very, very important. And we learned some of those things later that we thought we knew. But it is pretty simple. I'd say a lot of it has to do with the understanding of if there are maybe family members out there that are questioning the intention and who's involved and if someone's being pushed to do this. And sometimes families have none of that involved. And then other times there's like maybe a sibling that shows up that was like, oh, I really think that my new stepdad had other intentions here and they were wanting my loved one gone earlier than later because of these reasons. So I think you got to know your people pretty well to just make sure things are aligned. It's smart to have, as I said, this VSED statement, but then have a couple of videos of the person who's wanting to VSED recorded with them, one leaving a message for themselves, reminding them. It helps, it can be used during the VSED process if they start questioning and saying like, hey, I'd like some water. Like, why am I doing this again? And if they're pushing back on, well, this is the reason why. And if I gave you water, it would stop this process. And they're like, forget it. I am way too thirsty. Like, give me the water now. And, at that point, a doula or a family member might say, well, I'm going to play a video for you just to remind you that if you did start drinking water at this time, it would stop this process. And then that means eventually you would go into memory care or you wouldn't recognize all of us. And that's your choice. But so you have these videos to be a helpful tool and also as kind of like another way to say like this person really was wanting to do this. No one was pushing them to do this. This was their full will. And that's something that I think always has to be in place when you're looking to potentially VSED. I've had clients that have wanted to VSED and have gone through the totality of this experience. And then I have other people that have thought they wanted to and then decided to do something else. They decided to go to Switzerland and basically do medical aid in dying there. And they had dementia, which is legal there. And they decided not to VSED. They decided to live with the disease. If you know your person and they're not questioning it, I think there has to be some realism too with, it's not an easy choice. And it's not a painless process. You are uncomfortable during periods of time, but pain medication, comfort care, distractions, all the things are very helpful.
So I just want to remind the listeners too that Sarah is a doula and Wendy is a death doula. Is it a birth doula? How do I say it right? A birth?
Yeah.
No.
I'm a birth doula. Wendy's a
birth
death
doula.
doula. And our mom would call us the bookends of life.
Yes. And I think that is so notable because what are the chances that your parent is going to choose VSED and has at her disposal her beautiful daughters who happen to be a birth and a death doula. So it's just an incredible piece of the story.
It's interesting you say that just real quick, just because as a birth doula, there's no right or wrong way to give birth. And many people come saying, I want a birth doula because I want a natural birth. I'm like, okay, do you know how hard that is and how wonderful and all the pros and the cons? Let's line this up. And then you can decide to do a certain birth that you want, and it goes completely the other way, right? So there's these similarities of our mom saying like, I want to do this. And we're like, let's set it up so we can as best we can. And that's a huge part of what Wendy does in her work is how can we listen to your choices and make sure that we can fulfill that and have everything in place.
So I have a question. Just like you said, birth is like totally unknown. Even with a plan, it generally never goes exactly to plan. And being a death doula, Wendy, do you see death oftentimes going as people hoped or planned? Or is it always a wild card like birth?
Such a good question. I don't think I've ever been asked that. It's a great point that Sarah's bringing up and to discuss this because there are certain things that we hope you can control around end of life and that people want and that they get. Like if you're wanting to die at home or if you're wanting to die at a hospital, a death doula or the people around you, if you make that clear and you make choices that help you get to that place, there's a much better chance that's going to happen. If you know you want certain people in the room, if you know that, you're not wanting to be hooked up to any machines, if you know that you'd rather have less medication and be more clear-headed versus the opposite, when you're making some of those statements beforehand, there's a better chance that can happen. Does it always happen your way? No. If there is thought and personal touches and a sacred sense to this and really honoring this person the way that they're wanting to go, there's always a level of beauty that you can bring to this moment. I had two VSED clients before our mom VSEDed. Did we think that she was going to not recognize us on day 2? No way. We thought we would be having conversations with her through day 5, 6, then maybe start kind of forgetting who we were or be in and out of cognition. No, it was day 2. Like between the disease speeding up, being on lorazepam, like upping her dose to make sure that she was just not anxious, and then pulling back her food and water within those 5 days, especially the 2 days right before, very little. That sped things up tremendously, and we were not anticipating that at all. I'd say we also weren't anticipating that somebody that was very clear that she was wanting to do this wasn't allowing herself to fall into it and be a little bit more meditative. But then I'm like, but mom hated meditation. Like, why did we think she was going to be a calm mind through this? So I think, you do, even the people that you know so well, you're like, oh, I could have seen that coming perhaps.
But can you just bring us to like the day and paint the picture of the first day that you started to VSED? What was it like? Were you at her house? Were you both there? And sort of kind of talk us through what the process was like.
Well, it starts even before that. I mean, this is like the beauty of having a death doula as your sister. I just really have to say that we did hire 2 death doulas to support us, which is so important that Wendy could be a daughter and not the doula.
Okay.
It's like when people would say to me, like, are you going to get a birth doula? I'm like, well, yeah, I'm not going to be like, good job, Sarah, breathe, like, what we needed separate. So a week prior to someone VSEDing, it's really important that one of the things you do is that you go down to 500 calories a day. You don't want to shock the body that way. So we had what we called her Last Supper. So all of her grandkids, her 3 children, our significant others came to her house. We had a huge thing of pasta, chocolate cake, drank wine, and laughed. I love the story of her talking about first, second, third base with her grandchildren. What a great story to tell on your last, dinner. We all got dressed up. We have family photos. It was this beautiful night. So then after that, she has to go to 500 calories. Then that week, we had meetings with hospice, meetings with
The doulas came.
the doulas.
She also had a colonic, so she didn't have a great digestive system at all. And so sometimes people do this where it's much more comfortable if they don't have anything in their belly. So looking back, that was the right choice. She hated it, I have to say, but it was something that physically was a comfort for her through VSED to not be dealing with any kind of belly issues.
So, and then you, like Wendy said, you up her anxiety medicine. You're doing things and you're talking about it, and we were there every single day. And then really what happens is that home, which was her home that she knew where she wanted the bed to be in. She knew what she wanted. She had every detail. That home becomes a very, very sacred space. That home that someone is choosing to VSED in needs to be the utmost respect for anyone that crosses the threshold and comes inside. So there was signs on the doors, once you enter this space, make sure that you are, there's no food on your breath. There's no coffee on your breath. We could have no water, anything within the house. So again, this is a dying person. The respect that is happening to let them cross over is so deeply important. And we wanted to respect that.
No water in the house, you said. No water.
No, we had their home was like ridiculously perfect for this. I'm like, can't we just rent this house out for VSED? Because it was a 4-bedroom house. She was in the reading room, but the garage, and luckily like the gods were amazing to us. The end of May, beginning of June, it was beautiful weather, beautiful, perfect breeze. So the whole garage, we had the garage door open. We made a living room and a dining room outside. And we had every single meal, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, someone volunteered. So it was just like,
Wow.
you know, when you give birth, someone brings food, you hopefully have a meal train. We had a meal train for the whole entire time. Everything. And so we all were fed. So that was our gathering space because you would have to take these breaks. So just to summarize it a little bit more, the home was where my mother was going to be. And anyone that entered it, you wanted to be respectful of her choice. Wendy biked to and from our mom's house for her stress relief every day. I stayed at the house every night with my significant other. I slept with her the first 5 nights. And then finally, my best friend was like, you can't sleep with her anymore. You need a break. My drug of choice is a martini at 4 p.m. So, like, I did that. Our brother would come and go. And then we had a beautiful rotation of people and singers. We had day 2 or 3 had something called a kimono, which is a really beautiful wheelchair that you can go back and forth. Your legs can lift. So when she couldn't walk after day 3,
5.
okay, she would be rolled out to the deck. One day she was on her deck the whole entire day. We slept with her, we rubbed her. So day 1 was really the setting of the intention of the space. And it really held through the whole entire thing. I'm going to jump a little more forward to day 8 when Wendy took me outside and we stood on the patio and the driveway and the sun was coming down. And she's like, Mom's not going to die if this keeps happening. And I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, all these visitors, all this love, all these people coming to sing and say goodbye to her. She didn't want to leave because she has such FOMO and like, so we had to put the kibosh, sadly. We had to tell the last few people, like, I'm sorry, it's too much. And so on that day, it was a Thursday. Wendy's like, we've got to kind of take the temperature. We're kind of all in 5th gear and 6th gear and keeping her comfy. We actually kind of have to start to soften. And then Friday was the day that she left us at 4:20 in the afternoon. That last day, we knew we had to calm it down. So we were all in a text and we each took an hour. And David's like, I would like 4 o'clock. I'm like, great. Everybody knew David was going to be in there in 4. And she didn't want to pass in front of all of these people. So she was alone with him. Wendy was on a bike ride. I was in the garage with my daughter and my brother and my mom's best friend. I mean, all of this to say, like, it was the hardest week of my entire life. And it was absolutely the best week of my entire life to see this woman like take this sacrifice because she's so unselfish. She didn't want to have to put all of us through this. She chose this way because she's like, I know how painful it's going to be for 3 years. I'm going to try to make it as short as I can for you guys. And I think one of the hardest was the day 2 or 3 or 4 when one of the doctors and nurses said, you know, this is going to take longer than 9 days. And we're like, what? Oh God. They're like, she's healthy. And we're like, okay. So it was just all the emotions. And that's why Wendy and I started writing at the end of each day and just processing what happened emotionally, physically, what were the signs. And I needed to bring my own voice so everybody could hear a different daughter's voice. That was a very long summary of the first day. But
No,
Wendy, what
it's
did I miss?
This podcast is centered around the sandwich generation, and you both have children. How was it guiding your children through this process as mothers while you are also helping your mother through this and being a daughter? Like, those are a lot of different roles.
I mean, for me, I will just speak first that my mother gave my daughter and I the best gift in the whole entire world. My daughter said this year, I'm going to say something really weird. And I was like, I'm right here, babe. Like, what's going on? She goes, I'm not scared of dying. I'm like, that's because your nanny did that. She's like, yeah. My daughter was very involved. So she was there half the time. And then she was there the day my mom passed. That was really important for her, was to be there. And it
How
just
old
grew
was
us
she?
so, at the time she was 9.
Okay.
She was 9 and she was just very, very close to her. But I think being that I raise her half the time by myself, like it's a lot of she and I
Sure.
don't have a lot of walls to hide behind, literally and figuratively. I have a very small home and she hears everything and she feels my emotions so deeply that there wasn't any hiding my anger, my sadness. And so I was just super, super raw in front of her, probably way too much at times because I don't know boundaries very well, but it's grown us just deeper. and how much we talk about my mom.
Yeah, I'd say mine was each child was a little different how they wanted to be involved or not. Although it was really difficult, they all were there. One of the visits, like day 4 or 5, when my mom woke up from sleeping and was really wanting water, was confused, frustrated, and sad. And it rocked them. And I found myself like finding them in different parts of the house, and we were all in our room crying together. And honestly, not that I would want them to have to go that for any reason, but the fact that they did witness that, they could see that this was not something that was easy to do. And then I think that that there was a level of like, oh yeah, Nani set out to do this and she's doing it her way. And they also like, they had a relationship with our uncle, they had seen him in really hard times. So they understood that. I think my mom had a relationship differently with each one of them. She loved being their grandmother. Like she lived for it. She could spend all her hours with them, and they knew that. So I think it was like they were a little bit older, so it was the balance of how much can I give Nani, how much can I be open to her. It was my oldest came and just sat with her for an hour. I think he was there for half hour, like the last day that she came, that she was alive. He came and sat with her, and that was beautiful. And I think it is something where it's so personal. At some point, I think have an option of how involved they want to be, because no one wants to be forced into situations where it's just too much for them to handle and it's confusing, or it's just too hard on the heart. But I do think giving them that, like there were times I was like, I mean, they could see me in the car driving to that dinner that we had for my mom a week before. And I was pissed. I did not want to be doing that dinner. That was the last place I wanted to go. And I could say that to them. And then they could also hear me say after coming home of, that was so much fun. What a joy that, like, what a gift that, like, mom gave us in that space. And I'm so glad you could hear all those things that she was saying. And they also saw how exhausting it was for their mom and their aunt to support their mother in that way. They saw how a death can take over your life, because I really wasn't present at all for months around that time, mentally at all.
All of her grandchildren are so proud of this documentary. That's the biggest thing that shines through. I mean, my daughter's like, "What are we wearing to the Oscars?" I think it's so interesting because her death is just still such a huge part of our life, and what a blessing. And it's also really hard, especially on me. Like having this conversation and this phone call. Like, I'm going to be exhausted after this,
Yeah.
but guess what? I have a meeting. Like, I don't have time to be exhausted. Like, I don't have time to cry right now, which sucks. Like having to compartmentalize, but we get to tell this story. And I think our partners, our life partners, our children are so proud. And to like literally be able to have their grandma on the big screen of what a crazy, fun, wacky woman she is, like that is such a gift. I mean, we have hours and hours of footage. Like they will never, ever forget who she is, whether they want to or not. So that all just feels like such a beautiful part of this journey. And I think for this generation, Wendy's oldest is 19, and like we are talking about death in a different way, and that they will talk to us about death. And we are opening up this conversation that we must start having. And you guys are doing it on the podcast, and people are starting to do it. When it comes to this film, at the end of the day, if it's 20 minutes or 40 minutes, we just want people to know that it is okay to talk about your last breath and what you want and how can we change this next generation.
And doesn't it feel like control? Like, doesn't it feel like people are just trying to hold on so tight because the conversations aren't happening? I feel like the more people have these conversations, even if they're hard or even if they're tricky at first, there's so much freedom.
I would say, too, it's like, why don't we talk about where we think we're going? Or how are we going to show up in each other's lives? Let's just be open about, like, I'm scared to die. Okay, well, let's talk about being scared. What is it going to be when you lose your husband? Like, let's talk about what you're going to miss. Let's talk about how you're going to communicate. When we can have these conversations, it's so meaningful to your life present.
Right.
I wanted to ask just this actually about, I know that you both talked about anger, and I wondered, are you still angry about like the fact that she's gone? Are you angry about how she went? And my other question is like, how does she show up?
I'm not angry. I miss her terribly. I miss her. But she shows up obviously with this work I'm doing all the time. It's just because I get to tell stories, and I Sarah, I got to share a story with Sarah that she hadn't heard. And, so I think like that's the cool part. And she shows up in ways of like how I parent, what I'm saying, how I'm thinking, how I'm speaking. I'm like, oh, there she is again. Here I am. The sun, the light, nature, all the things. So it's like she's such a part of me and who I am and how I was formed. So I see her in that. And then I also see her literally out in the world. I used to be, I think, definitely pissed of like, gosh, she has a lot more to give. And she was so young. But then I just, of so many people that lost parents at a much younger age. And I'm so grateful that she didn't get an early diagnosis. She didn't get this when she was in her mid 50s, early 60s. She was able to have 4 marriages, travel across the world, affect so many people, and have this opportunity for a legacy regarding VSED, which she never set out to do. So I think she lived a life that I think people will find to be something that is helpful and noteworthy, and I'm just really proud to be her daughter. So no, I don't have any anger.
And I would say for me, there's definitely not anger. My mom could have lived easily 10 more years. Easily. She was so physically healthy and so goddamn gorgeous. But I'm angry at the disease that we don't have a cure. I'm angry at that. But in general, like, this was her journey.
Yeah.
You can't argue with that. Like, this was her diagnosis. I'm angry that I don't have someone to go to Target with anymore because I fucking loved going to Target with her. She's with me all the time. I mean, she just like follows me around. It's adorable.
I have to say that you guys are such an inspiration because, my sister and I are losing our mom, and there's just so many phases to it. And, she would call us every day. And I wouldn't always take the call, but my sister always did. Because I'd just be like, oh, I'm busy, Mom. And just in January, she stopped calling. My sister and I call each other. And I realize my new purpose for my sister is to fill in the blanks now. And like, she's going to call me before a doctor's appointment. She's going to call me when she is proud of her kid. She's going to call me when she's just like needing to talk to somebody. Like when you call your mom when you're like, yo, Mom, I'm in the car. And I have to pick up. I have to pick up and I have to check on her in the times that my mom would, because I'm not as good as my mom would be about that, but I have to be. And I just thank you for like displaying such a beautiful relationship and, trying to fill in the blanks. And it's amazing, and the laughter and the tears and all the things.
Are there places that people can follow your journey or like a bit that you want to just share with the listeners on how they can continue to follow this story and learn more?
Yeah, definitely. Well, so if you go to the CherylHauserEffect.com, you can subscribe to the emails of updates of where we are with our process and progress. And then you're able to have access to all the news media that's ever been about Mom and learn a lot about it. Also links to VSED resources. You're able to read the 10 days of journaling that we did around Mom's VSEDing. And you're able to learn about the film so you can see what our mission is, where the intentions are to have, to where this film will be, how it will be used. The 4-minute teaser lives on the website, and you can contribute that way too. So there's multiple ways, be it nonprofits that are wanting to be, different kind of levels of partnership, impact partners, other things, or if you have $10 to give or $10,000 to give. We're happy either way.
I love it.
We're not going to say no.
Thank you so much.
We could
There's
have
so
done this
much
another
more.
hour.
There really
Yeah.
is so much more to
Thank
say.
you.
So,
You
but
guys
we
ask great
appreciate you
questions.
and your time and everything that you're creating.
And if we had a drink, we would say to Cheryl.
To Cheryl.
Cheers.
Cheryl!
We hope you enjoyed today's episode, and hopefully you can take away some helpful info and tips. All links and resources can be found in our show notes.
Please share this episode with anyone you think this might help. And if you have a topic that you'd like to talk more with us about in the sandwich generation world, please slide into our DMs on Instagram. Our handle is @thesandwichgenerationpod. We hope you'll be back for more convos with us soon. And remember, no matter whose diaper you're changing, you're never alone. That was great.
That was great. That was really good. All right. Ooh,
That was a lot.
that was a great conversation. And we haven't done a reaction recording in our last few episodes because we felt like they were wrapped up so nicely. But this is a topic and one that's very timely, especially for you, Robyn, on everything that you're going through with your mom.
Yeah.
Approach, but also how we approach our own thoughts on
Yeah.
midlife and aging.
Yeah. I was just saying to Elisa, I find myself recently kind of like obsessing or like focused, maybe really laser focused on, I'm watching my mom slowly slip away and thinking to myself, like, I never want my kids to see this. Like, do I have the gene? Am I already starting to enter into like the early signs? They tell you in your midlife, like you could already be having like amyloid plaque or whatever. I find myself thinking like, how many years do I have to give my children? I'm doing the math all the time. I had my kids in my early 40s. Like my mom was 65 when she showed up with signs. Does that mean like, are my kids going to be 25 when they start to see signs? Could I give them 10 more good years if I lean into all the research about like exercise? And like, there's so much out there about if you have the gene for Alzheimer's, what can you do? And all of this is swirling in my head. And then on top of that, and I'm just kind of like free flowing right now. Sorry, my stream of
That's
consciousness. But on top of that, seems horrible to say, but I'm just going to be really honest. I have thought about like, just let her go. Let my mom go. Like, what are we doing? What are we doing? And I hate to admit that, but I'm just being honest. Like, it sucks, like watching this. And I just think to myself, my mom was like Cheryl in a lot of ways. She was beautiful and effervescent and, elegant. And like, that's how I want to remember her. And I swear she'd probably want to be remembered the same way. And here we are in this in between. And I just am like, I would be devastated, but I would also be like relieved.
Yeah.
And it's a horrible thing to actually think. But you get to a point where you're like, the heavier lift is to like watch this in real time. And so all these things are on my mind about my own life because you think, okay, I'm thinking about my mom and what's happening here. And then I'm thinking about like, well, what's next? What can I do? How can I be productive in my life? How can I do this differently? How can I live differently? How can I die differently? So, just a lot of like light thoughts over here as I drink my LaCroix.
Well, I think you're processing is what you're doing, right?
That is,
I mean, you're living and you're feeling and you're processing your mom's decline with Alzheimer's, and it's horrible. And there's some beautiful moments that you continue to have with her that I see too, but it's really, really fucking hard. There's no sugarcoating that. But it's only natural to think about relief and sadness all at the same time.
I learned about the story and VSED. I actually saw Wendy at like the beauty shop and we were like chatting and just some normal beauty shop chatter about her mom did VSED. I was like, what did you say your mom? I didn't understand what VSED was. And she was one of the very first people I told that my mom had Alzheimer's, actually, which was very strange. But they say in the grieving process, your friends are strangers and your strangers are friends, which is very true.
So true.
And so it was easy to tell her in a way. She's kind of a distant person I know. And I was like, yeah. And she told me she was a death doula. But I just was thinking, had we known about VSED, like when my mom was getting diagnosed, not that necessarily this would have been something for us or for my mom. No, it's such a big decision. But it's just so interesting. Like my mom was diagnosed only a couple of years ago, but like it was so much harder for us to talk. My mom couldn't really talk about it.
Sure.
She knew it was happening. She didn't want anyone else to really talk about it. But I remember when we were with the doctors at Mayo and I was like, okay, well, what can we, instead of focusing on the destruction of her brain, thank you. I was like, I know we need to know, but I kind of shut down that conversation. I was like, what can we do today? What can we do with the rest of the time that we have? So we focused on that. And that was a really good open discussion. And it was like one of the times I remember it was a little easier for my mom to sort of embrace that like this was happening to her and to focus on the positive. But there was such a like way less conversation about it with her and like including her in it and the conversations about what she wanted. I mean, I do wish I would have sort of met these sisters or like talked to them earlier and learned about the Cheryl Hauser Effect, which is why I think it's so incredible for people that are maybe the very beginning of the journey to be learning about like there's a whole world out there of people that are taking the Alzheimer's diagnosis and doing something different with it. And that is like incredible.
I do also love that at the end of the day, our mom never thought that she'd be the poster girl for VSED, right?
Yeah.
But whether you choose VSED or not, my big takeaway from them is being so open and keeping the conversation going with your loved ones, with yourself, with your significant other, with your extended family, with your friends, that can help everyone process instead of holding it so close and hiding it. And I'm not saying that that's what your mom was doing, but that can probably feel confusing or hard, but that's also how our culture has set up diagnosis and aging anyway. Even the idea of a death doula is still something that is way more common, but is a very new concept for our culture.
Yeah.
And ushering people out of this earthly life.
Well, and, we kind of talked about it, the idea of control.
Yeah.
And, it's funny because when someone you love gets diagnosed with something, everyone around that person does sometimes try to control the situation, right? By being like, we want them to stay longer. And like, how can we help them? We need to let's keep prolonging. What are the cures? What can we do? And that is one part of the conversation that's interesting. And sometimes it does get a little it gets to be controlling. But what I think is so interesting about VSED and about just the conversation around VSED is the idea that the person who is being afflicted can actually have control. Yeah. And that is like a very new idea because I think we were just saying offline, okay, what if I get tested for the gene, for the Alzheimer's gene, and I have it? Then okay, then I guess I just have to live with that fate and do what I can. But now I'm learning, well, not only can I do something about it, there's research out there that I can exercise, I can change my diet, I can prioritize my sleep. And when the time comes, if this is going to show up in my life, I can also choose how I want to end it, which is murky because there is a lot of legality around that. So that's why VSED has become a legal option. But who knows what it will be by the time I get there. Also, I was I could get hit by a car and whatever. So that's true too, which is really dark, but whatever, having a dark conversation. It's you can't control everything about life or death, but it is an interesting concept to think about the fact that you don't have to be shamed for it, that there is a way to control. If you have a degenerative disease, that you can actually control how you go out. And that is actually hugely liberating for somebody like me thinking about watching this happen to my mom and thinking about this could be me and not in 30 years. I do have a little bit more control than I think we've ever known.
I think that life is a journey. It is such a journey.
Show is.
And we don't know how, we never know going back to birth. We never know how a birth is going to go. Exactly. There's no control. There's no way you know exactly how that's going to play out. And our lives are kind of the same thing. And I mean, something I'm trying to, the thoughts that come through my mind are what do I feel about death? How do I want it to feel normal and natural, but what does that mean? Because I don't know. And I don't want to be painful and I don't want to be painful for anyone else around me. And, there's all these intrusive, but honest thoughts. I think that sneak into my brain. And I think for me, I largely think about a financial piece too. And in just aging, watching my parents age and seeing the cost of care in America, I'm just how the fuck are we going to do this when we're older? What does our healthcare look like? What does our care look like? I don't know. That to me seems such a big issue that we got to figure out in the United States that is so fraught right now. And that affects us all. And that's going to affect our kids and stuff like that. But I think that we all do have a journey.
I'm really glad that we talked about this today. And thank you for being my friend.
Of course.
I love you.
I love you too.
And I love that we get to talk to such courageous, inspirational people.
Totally.
Because that was fucking awesome. Very stylish with those glasses too.
Oh,
anyway,
I want them.
I know. And if you guys went, Cheryl, here's the Cheryl again. She was a fucking broad. You know what I'm saying? Wow. What an example of how to live and party. Okay, so here's to more parties for Cheryl.
More parties. To
All right,
life.
Bye.